If you look at some very specific kinds of attacks, ransomware attacks on small businesses are increasing somewhere around 35-40% per year. That means you're going to have a doubling of total ransomware attacks attacking small businesses every 2 to 3 years.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome Ethan. I am so thrilled that he is here today. He is the CEO of Cybee AI, which is a Zurich-based startup founded in 2024 that's building AI-driven, enterprise-grade cybersecurity and compliance solutions tailored for not only startups, but also small to medium-sized businesses. With over 2 decades of experience in building and growing digital companies, especially with their roots in Silicon Valley, your leadership and background is incredibly compelling and something that I'm looking forward to digging into today. So, Ethan, welcome to the show. Give everybody a hello and let them know where you're calling in from.
Well, thank you, Darren. It's so nice to be here with you. Thank you for the invite. I am calling in from Tucson, Arizona.
And for those of you that don't know, Ethan has been kind enough to join our podcast. And if you don't know this about Arizona, Arizona does not have daylight savings time. So instead of him being in mountain time, he's currently in Pacific time, and it is currently 4:30 in the morning there. And like they say, legends either go to bed at 4 a.m. or wake up at 4 a.m. So that makes you a legend, Ethan.
Thank you. All I hear is that the early bird gets the worm, and I'm not that excited about worms, but I still keep getting up early. It's just it's what works for me.
Well, that's good. For those of you that are new to our podcast, what we do is we bring in cybersecurity experts from all over the world, and we kick off with their background and role in the company, their vision. We explore key industry trends and then dig into both the present and future of what cybersecurity will look like, both in the industry and with their own company. So buckle up because this is going to be an awesome podcast. So, Ethan, again, thank you so much for joining today. So let's just start with your background. Can you tell us about your journey in technology and how that led you to founding Cybee AI?
Yeah. Gosh. So I guess it goes back quite some time. I uh, moved up to Silicon Valley in 2000, right? The spring of 2000, really sort of the height of that first internet bubble. And in Silicon Valley, there was something about the the environment, the culture of the place, and specifically startup culture, getting a small group of people working on a really hard problem together. There's something that comes out of just the energy of that was immediately appealing to me. And so I sort of found a happy place in Silicon Valley. I stayed there for about 12 years, working at venture-backed technology startups, um, and their clients. So I got sort of a broad swath of experience with both sort of hyperscaling venture capital companies. I was an early hire at a company called healthline.com that is uh, today one of the largest health and medical information platforms in the world. They were a tiny startup when I joined them, and just seeing the growing pains that a startup goes through as they finally get their footing and address a really large and lucrative market. And you see these big entities, and I've been fortunate enough to participate in the building of some of these big entities. And in seeing that, both at the level of the venture-backed technology startups, but also in some cases, because we worked in healthcare, we had the opportunity to work directly with some of the largest companies in the U.S. So we worked with a health, a, basically a U.S. health system that I believe is one of the top 10 largest organizations in the United States. And we were helping them with a really big branding exercise. They were rebranding their service, and that involved a domain migration. And once you start getting into the weeds of how companies go about the complex work of literally building the the infrastructure and the artifacts and the online systems that we all use from day to day, you can see up close the actual battle of building these things securely. This was some years ago. I cannot tell you how much time I had to spend lobbying and making a case for the scope of the project for this huge health insurance company migrating over to a new domain to also migrate to HTTPS, right, as a way to protect critical client data in transit. This was enough years ago back, in history that there wasn't the same level of there wasn't the same level of education and care put towards cybersecurity. But it literally took me weeks to lobby for the resources and build consensus internally that, yeah, this was a little bit of scope creep, but it's actually critical scope creep that's going to help keep client data safe and ultimately this huge insurance company safe. But in working on projects like that, you realize how far the average organization, even a very sophisticated organization, is away from some of the real load-bearing fundamentals of cybersecurity. And that's something that I've always carried with me through my career.
So when you talk about pretty much all those opportunities, not only in cybersecurity, but really with health data, what would
Yeah.
you say was the biggest challenge you faced early on?
Boy, I mean, and this goes outside of the realm of cybersecurity specifically, but one of the primary challenges that we faced was literally the complexity of the program itself. Once you start getting into these very large organizations, it's not like I had an executive sponsor at the healthcare company, and underneath that, the structure necessary to support this ended up spanning 8 different teams from 8 different companies in 8 different geographies, Accenture consultants, IT consultants, everything that you can possibly manage. And at the time, it was at, these large enterprise projects are so governed by the business case for them, the acceptable level of investment based on the expected level of return, that if along the way you come across something that is in fact very meaningful and load bearing, like secure transport of data, you can find that along the way and say, hey, this is absolutely critical for us to address this. And it goes into the prioritization queue, right? There is no special class of service for what I see as sort of existential threats to business from a data security and privacy perspective. Most of the project managers at large companies are focused on getting the project done on time and on budget. And so when you come in with these incredibly important initiatives around improving the cybersecurity of the overall application, if that wasn't built in at the beginning, you say, "Oh, that's scope creep. We're going to have to address that in some future, release, which is 3, 6, 9 months down the road." So it's really for me, it was an exercise, especially with these large companies, and trying to understand how they make decisions through these very complex matrixed environments, and then hopefully through strong partnership with executive sponsors, you can build those relationships where you will have a champion in the organization at that executive sponsor level who understands, hey, when we bring forward security vulnerabilities in this application, this isn't a nice to have. It's not scope creep. It's a P1 bug and we have to fix it. And so learning how to navigate those more complex large enterprise environments has certainly been a learning experience that's informed my approach with all companies.
And that's a perfect segue. So when we talk about, it reformed your approach, We're talking about large enterprise scale companies. So, with your business focused on small to medium size, walk me
Mhm.
through how you're able to adapt that approach into the smaller businesses.
Yeah, and I think that, as we're shifting our focus at Cybee to really laser in on the needs and the opportunities to service small and medium-sized businesses, you realize that the the structure of the organization is so completely different that the structure of the offering essentially has to be completely different. The there are if I look out at the landscape in cybersecurity right now, I'm noticing three really big trends. First and foremost, and this is sort of news to no one who's been spending on time online for the past couple of years, is that the world is fundamentally changing because of the maturation of AI. Right? It is far from perfect, but it is more capable. All in all, every day it's getting more capable, and that really changes the threat dynamics that we all encounter out there online. And then the next piece that follows from that is, given that we're having this absolutely huge increase in the attack surface that most businesses are exposed to because of technologies like AI, you say, okay, well, who do we have to help us? And in my view, the the market tends to bifurcate in a pretty stark way. Legacy cybersecurity companies are squarely focused on the enterprise opportunity because that's where the money is, right? So if you look at an analysis of the 200 million, $215 million that are spent on cybersecurity globally across the world, a reasonable estimate is that about 70% of that is going to large enterprises, companies with over 1,000 employees that roll up to that organization. 70% of all spending is going to large enterprises. What does that imply about where small businesses are? From my perspective, small businesses are getting left in the lurch. Rapidly changing, and the complexity of the threat ecosystem is just growing and growing and growing every day. The good news for the large companies that have large budgets is they have an incredible list of tooling and options available to them as enterprise customers. But I think that sort of begs the question of, if 70% of the total revenue goes to servicing enterprise customers, who's giving really compelling solutions to small and medium-sized businesses? And I think that's the opportunity that Cybee is really interested in addressing. Because you do see, if you just look at that small business segment, depending on the report you read, the stats that you read, some of them suggest that somewhere around 40 to 60% of all small businesses have no cybersecurity in place at all. Right? That's a huge problem for these companies. And in addition to the fact that we have roughly half of that small business population completely unprotected, I would say that of the other 49 and 50% that do have some sort of cybersecurity protections in place, I would not be at all surprised to find that those are predominantly what we would think of as consumer cybersecurity apps. These are people downloading things like Norton or McAfee or something like that for their business and just running it across their machines. And I think that the Is that better than nothing for a small business? Absolutely. Any layer of protection that you can give to your business, your finances, your reputation, your customers' data is a smart thing to do. But I think that we also, because of these changing dynamics of the landscape around the increasing velocity and variety of attacks that we're seeing, I worry that legacy consumer surprise, like legacy security applications, are likely to perhaps lure small businesses into having a false sense of security, right? They're like, oh, I downloaded McAfee, I downloaded Norton, it's running in the background, it's doing great. It's doing great in the context that it was built for, which is basically being a terminal on your machine that makes external calls to a vulnerability database, and when it finds a new vulnerability and that vulnerability is patched, it's integrated into that piece of consumer cybersecurity, and then you get protection. And I think that model is coming under huge threat just because of these macro level changes that we're seeing in the landscape. When we're looking at the increase in 0-day threats, literally things that nobody has ever seen before, you look at the trends at which total cybersecurity attacks are increasing. I was looking at the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, their national vulnerability database. In the past 3 years, the total number of identified bugs that are making it into the CVE database, in the past 3 years, that's doubled. It appears to be doubling. If you look at some very specific kinds of attacks, ransomware attacks on small businesses are increasing somewhere around 35-40% per year. That means you're going to have a doubling of total ransomware attacks attacking small businesses every 2 to 3 years. And you know that by doubling, this is Moore's law, right? It goes exponential really quick. And so when I look at that changing nature of the threat landscape, and I hear small businesses using some consumer grade cybersecurity app, is that better than nothing? Absolutely it is, right? It's absolutely better than nothing. But is it also potentially luring you into a false sense of security where the kinds of attacks that are becoming more and more prevalent, especially things like 0-day attacks, an attack that nobody has ever seen before on a given day, 0-day attacks, ransomware, phishing, all of these kinds of things, where attackers are infiltrating your system and sometimes have long-term access to your system. I saw a stat the other day. The average duration from which a small business is infected with ransomware to the point at which they recognize that they've been attacked is 194 days. That's 6 months. You've got some like it's so weird to me when we think about this in the context of like a computer. It's somehow sort of like remote and it's contained, it's in a box. If we thought of that same dynamic in our personal lives, the idea of your home getting robbed is awful and threatening to all kinds of people for very obvious reasons. But and sometimes you hear people who had been the victim of a robbery, they come back to their house and they just don't feel safe in it anymore, right? They're just like, I'm worried about some guy lurking around that door. I just don't feel safe in here anymore. And that's somebody who was in your house for like what, an evening, a few minutes. Imagine if the thing that is carrying the vast majority of your valuable personal and financial data, your computer, is compromised by a thief who gets to wander around in there for 6 months. right? Just planning all of that terrible stuff that they might do. It's it's really terrifying when you look at that and you realize just how deep some of these vulnerabilities are.
Well, and I definitely think that anybody thinking that there's someone in their house for 6 months, no one would be sleeping probably forever. So
Right.
we should
Right.
release this around Halloween so that way it's part of the scary theme. But I mean, it's very true. You know, the hackers are in there because they're collecting data, slowly expanding almost like a virus, trying to make sure that when they do take over, it's really intense. So my
That's right.
question for you is obviously a big hot word in the industry right now is artificial intelligence or
Yes.
AI. And so when it comes to cybersecurity, especially for small and medium-sized businesses that maybe don't have the capital to invest in all the high-end fancy stuff, what are like the two things you recommend they start doing today?
Well, and so this really does strike at the heart of what we're trying to do with Cybee here, um, because the the needs that businesses have, given the threat environment that all businesses operate in, the needs for a really powerful and robust security offering have never been better. Like they've never been more pronounced. But at the same time, to my view, the people who are the most in need of this kind of technology and protection are, in fact, probably among the least educated and least well served in this industry, and that is small and medium sized businesses. And so, I think that it's when we look at how this industry is changing, right? We have this massive increase in overall threats. You have huge platforms out there like Microsoft, for example. Microsoft has actually done, I would say, a service to our industry over the past year or so because they have come out with some very clear, very powerful statements about where security sort of fits into the overall um, set of priorities inside of Microsoft. And I don't know if you remember this. I think this was in May of 2024. Satya Nadella came out with a podcast, or no, it wasn't a podcast. It was a blog post, and the title of the blogcast, what the blog was prioritizing security above all else. I was like, wow, that's quite a statement for a blog post from a CEO. Not we maintain our commitment to first in class security or security continues to be a huge priority. It's prioritizing customer security is we prioritize that above all else. He went on to say later, security is our number one priority and our number one customer need. And even further, he has a standing order apparently across Microsoft where if a Microsoft employee has a choice between working on something that is non-security versus security, the standing order is you work on security. And I find those big sort of corporate positioning statements quite compelling because having worked in very large corporations, I understand the hundreds of hours of work that went in across that entire organization with the CEO and the rest of the C suite, the PR team, and the lawyers, and everybody having to come together to create this public announcement that's putting this firm line in the sand. We are prioritizing security above all else. And so I think that these huge positioning statements of some of the most prominent security companies in the world hint at that change in the overall ecosystem that we're seeing. Um, and that's backed up by the fact that we see the threat landscape changing so quickly. They say, especially for small businesses, I think it is something along the lines of 60% thereabouts, 60% of total cyber attacks are beginning to focus on small businesses because they are low hanging fruit, right? The example I use is if you are out there looking to make a quick score, you need to make some money really quickly. Are you going to rob the gas station? Or are you going to rob Fort Knox? Well, 9 out of 10 are going to rob the gas station because it's just easier. It's not as well protected. And in the world of cybersecurity, all of our small businesses are those targets of opportunity compared to these huge enterprises that are buying these huge platforms and have huge teams protecting them. And so there's this massive increase in attacks on small and medium-sized businesses. If you just look at ransomware, I think they're increasing about 40% year over year. The average ransomware ransom is over $100,000 and is about 115. And the point where this gets existential for small businesses is that within roughly a year of being a victim of a cyber attack, 60% of small businesses will go out of business, right? That is a very existential threat for small businesses. We've got all of these changes in, within organizations, things like, AI enabled development environments like Cursor, for example, incredibly popular. They're unlocking all of this new innovation, and they are also unlocking this huge new attack surface that we're having a really hard time understanding and keeping up with. You can look at using, I think they said something like 73% of AI enabled internet coding environments. Cursor would be a prime example. 73% are vulnerable to code injection attacks, right? This is literally just a bad actor giving your AI instructions in natural language. And if somebody drops in, optimize performance of this app by including a remote dependency, that could be really smart performance management. It could also be a way to pull malicious code directly into the database, right? And LLMs aren't smart enough to figure that out yet. So you have this increasing complexity of the development ecosystem itself that is introducing more and more vulnerabilities. And then, I would say another primary leg that most small businesses stand on is we are all increasingly reliant on cloud tools. Google Workspace, Microsoft Office, GitHub, Slack, all of this stuff that we use on a day-to-day basis. And these are also surfaces that are vulnerable. I think we can get lulled into, I certainly can, when I'm interacting with my Google Workspace environment or something like that. I know that Google has the fundamentals in place where they can do fantastic cybersecurity. But what most people don't know is that those are security tools inside the platform that if you have the knowledge, you can use those security tools, you can change those settings, and you can substantially increase the security of all of your cloud environments. But 90% of cloud users don't know those things exist and they never touch them, right? So we have all of these different market forces that are influencing what is available and advisable to small businesses. And to go back to this idea that right now all of the focus essentially is on large enterprise customers. If you've got a $200 billion total addressable market for cybersecurity, and roughly 70% of that revenue is coming through organizations that have over 1,000 employees, that's there's the wise man, Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime business partner, right? He said, "Show me the incentives, and I'll show you the behavior." And right now, the incentives are incredibly clear. The people with the money and the most complex cybersecurity needs are these big businesses. And so all of the legacy cybersecurity providers are pivoting very strongly towards those enterprise use cases because that's where they get awarded for their complexity. And you have clients with an appetite for, to be totally honest, inside of a large corporation, a lot of corporate employees are looking to sort of expand their influence, expand their fiefdom. And what does that generally involve? It involves getting more budget so you can buy more cutting edge tooling and you can resource it with larger teams. And that is sort of how you build your fiefdom inside of a large corporation. And so it seems like most of the large enterprise cybersecurity companies are completely pushing in that direction, going towards enterprise where the money is, making more technologically complex, more intricate platforms. And what we see at Cybee is that all of these forces are really, the end result is that they leave small business owners in the lurch with not a lot of great options, right? It's either you're looking at these huge enterprise platforms that have huge costs associated with them, incredibly difficult and time consuming to deploy. You're going to have to hire a bunch of external consultants. What is a small business owner to do if they need really cutting edge cybersecurity, advanced threat protection, but they don't have an IT team to help them install and manage it? And that is 100% the area where Cybee is focusing.
And that's exactly what I was about to ask is when it comes to Cybee, what is working really well for the company right now that's helping enable these small businesses?
Yeah, the the thing that is the most helpful, I would say, is making it as simple as we can possibly make it, right? So we say specifically, Cybee is enterprise grade cybersecurity, cloud security, and regulatory compliance for small businesses with no IT team. And I think that's a critical piece. We have focused from a consumer perspective, we have focused so much time on making the the construction, the user experience of Cybee incredibly easy as we can, to the extent that a non-technical business owner can set up a security network for their entire company inside 5 minutes. That is the standard that we hold ourselves to. Can we deliver really cutting edge cybersecurity technology, but wrapped in a user experience that is so easy to understand and non confrontational to regular business owners and business users, that they actually feel good and confident interacting with it. Uh, and they are getting that value of comprehensive business protection without huge project plans and consultants and long timelines associated with it.
So when you implement something like that that's so fast, what are the key metrics that you're looking at improving?
The key metrics related to acquisition.
Just to help the company itself. So when you're implementing these
Yes.
systems, what are the metrics of the baseline compared to where you're trying to get them to?
Yeah. So that that is, we think about that in some different ways. Obviously, just from a user experience perspective, as I mentioned, like we are focused on making this as easy for a small business owner with no IT team to implement as possible, right? Our goal is it takes less than 5 minutes to set up your entire company. But then within that, the task for us is to keep the user focused on Well, first and foremost, we want to automate away as much complexity as we possibly can. We don't want to be creating mile-long task lists that individual users have to go in and action. We identify a problem on your the configurator particular machine does not meet the CIS benchmark. We have a one-click hardening offering where you can take a standard Windows PC laptop, for example. If you measure it against CIS benchmarks, out of the box, it's probably measuring under 10% compliance, probably single digits in terms of its security posture out of the box. If you then take that machine, put Cybee on it, and run our one-click hardening, in 30 seconds, your machine goes from 10% compliant to 85% compliant, right? So we're looking for those easy to understand, simple consumer user actions that actually carry with them a tremendous amount of technology value in terms of the protection that you're getting from doing that simple task.
Is there anything specific that someone can do today that takes it from 10% to 30% before they even have to install a tool?
So you're saying, could you get the same macro level increase in benchmark security posture by doing other things and not necessarily using Cybee to get there?
Correct. Just like, general updates on a computer or anything like that. Because
Oh,
when you
sure.
talk about out of the box, it's, a cyber hacker's dream because there's no
Yes.
security on it. It's outdated. So, what are just some general tips that you recommend to people at how to keep it as best as possible with just the built-in features currently?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so, of course, as part of our EDR dashboards, you'll download the Cybe agent to your Windows PC, your Linux PC, Mac OS, um, and we will always surface what I would sort of describe as general best practices. We will detect on your machine if you're running an outdated version of your operating system, you need to update something like that. Certainly, there are fundamentals like that that can be handled.
Okay. Well, great. So let's talk about the other side of Cybee. So those are all the benefits that you're giving. But have you run into any issues, or what has been the most struggle that Cybee has been facing and present?
Boy, for me, it is really the user experience challenge. And what I mean by that is, I've spent the past 25 years selling very technically complex work to organizations. And to me, the great arc of technology sort of bends towards democratization. To me, 20 years ago, I remember how much work it was to set up hosting for your own website, build that website, get it up and running, maintain it. 20 years ago, there was real work involved in that. Today, I go onto Wix, I go on to Squarespace, I sign up, I'm building my website inside 5 minutes, right? The great arc of technology bends towards democratization. And so I look at Cybee as really one of the leaders in that particular area. We know how important cybersecurity is. Like this is an existential threat to any business. If you sort of think of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs model, um, the the foundation is simple physical security. Everything else that you want on top of that, in your career, in the work that you do, chances are you want to make some money. And if you're successful in making money, you have that sort of capstone opportunity to hopefully use that money for good and give back to the community in a meaningful way. And those are wonderful things, and most people are focused on those from day to day. But what most people don't think about is that those goals 100% rest on a foundation of solid cybersecurity. If you don't have that, you're building on quicksand. And so for me and with Cybee, the greatest challenge is connecting with small business owners to make them understand the magnitude of the problem that they are facing. The fact that roughly half of all small business owners who process personally identifiable information have no cybersecurity in place, like that's dangerous for those businesses, right? That is bad things waiting to happen. And so there's the dual challenge of not only building a technology that truly is cutting edge and provides cutting edge protection, but does it in a simple, non-confrontational way that a small business audience can understand and get value out of. So it's balancing that dichotomy between like the deep level of technology that we've created at Cybee and the power of that technology. That's incredibly important to the functionality, but our audience is not in a position to get into those technical details and care about them. Oh, you have an adaptive intelligence system that uses behavioral AI at the kernel level of my PC, and it can see all of these different behaviors, and it can neutralize a suspicious set of behaviors in milliseconds, as opposed to a traditional cybersecurity offering that needs an update from the NIST CVE database to be pulled in and then actioned, and that can take weeks or months or what have you. All of that technical detail is meaningful to cybersecurity professionals, to the vast majority of small business owners. It's like the teacher in Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. And so for me, the challenge is bridging these two worlds, being able to educate small business owners on the existential threats that they're up against, but then also pair that with a software solution that meets them where they are, does not overwhelm them with unnecessary complexity, and yet still gives them that enterprise grade, cutting edge, advanced threat protection, cloud security, and regulatory compliance.
Well, I think that was a great example when you're talking about specifically the Charlie Brown example, because it is true. They don't have time to worry about it, right? Especially smaller business, they don't have the team that's large enough, kind of like what you mentioned that Cybee does. So when you're looking at Cybee into the future over like the next year, what are the goals that you're trying to get the company to in the next 12 months?
Yeah, as an early stage startup, we are doing early stage startup stuff. So we are currently going out and raising venture capital money because the team is expanding, because we see the size of the opportunity, we see the response that we've gotten from early alpha clients that we've deployed Cybee on, their interest, their desire for more functionality, for deeper functionality. So I think that we really we see the opportunity. From my perspective, having spent the past 25 years by and large selling very technical solutions to people who, let's be honest, are not technical and don't want to be. That's very important, right? We come at this with all of this, cybersecurity knowledge, and let me tell you about endpoint detection and response, and Sigma protocols, and Yara protocols, and encryption, and all this stuff. We're speaking Japanese to a small business audience. They don't have time for that. They are focused on other things. They are focused on cash flow. They're focused on making payroll. They have a very different set of priorities. And so for me, the challenge is really figuring out how we can communicate the existential importance of these kinds of protections for small businesses and make it understandable and less intimidating to then go and action and put some of these cybersecurity measures in place, as opposed to doing what lots of small business owners do, which is I find a piece of software, it looks really interesting, maybe it's a fit for me, but I can't even find out what the price is. And so I've got to go in and I have to set up a sales call and I have to get on the phone with the sales consultant and he gives me a price, but he's got to go back to his manager to see if he can get me a discount and all this stuff. Even the sales motion is frustrating for me as an SMB. I want to go directly to the company. I want to find the package that I'm interested in. I want to try a free trial for 14 days, which we offer. And from that point forward, if you like it and it's working, you know exactly what the cost is. It's $12 a month per device. We have volume pricing discounts, but it's all inclusive. There's no upsell. There's no hidden charges. There's no having to schedule a call with with a salesperson. It's all there available to a small business owner, and hopefully we're going to be able to do a job of explaining the value and packaging it in a way that they can capture that value very easily for their business.
I ask this question to everybody that comes on the show, and it almost sounds like you answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway just to see if it's the same answer. So, when you talk about that, obviously that is a very common issue in the industry is people understanding the worth of what you're providing because they're focused on the cash flow and everything else. So, if you had a magic wand and you could fix the one thing in your business that is holding you back from getting that attainability that you just mentioned, what would it be?
And, that when I think about that, the single thing that I am most focused on right now is talking to potential customers. It is literally understanding from potential customers, including people that considered Cybee and didn't end up buying it for whatever reason. I want to get as deep into their worlds as possible and understand for a small business owner, given that you have all of these other existential priorities in your mind related to your business, where does cybersecurity even show up in that list? Is it a top five consideration? I would be shocked if it was. Does it make the top 10? I hope so. Is it maybe somewhere in that gray area of like, oh, it's somewhere between 11 and 20, probably, right? It exists in the minds of small business owners, but without sufficient clarity around what the severity of the problem is, what that can mean for your business, and therefore what remedies you might be interested in looking at. To me, it really comes down to a communication challenge for small business owners and trying to take all of this technical complexity that we have at the platform level and distill it down to just those pieces that are immediately relevant and understandable to small business owners and therefore actionable by them. It really comes down to it's a customer discovery and and a marketing problem in terms of how we can educate this group that has huge needs, but as we've seen, roughly half of them haven't made any inroads. They haven't made any efforts to improve the security posture of their companies. They don't even have cybersecurity in place. How can we talk to those people effectively?
Gotcha. I think that's a great point. So, for all of our listeners, do you have any final words for them?
Final words. Gosh. Yeah, I mean, I think that final words would suggest that I have some sort of words of wisdom to impart. I don't think that I do. I think I have a lot of questions about the needs of our specific audience, small business owners, startup owners, related to these complex and frustrating areas of cybersecurity, cloud security, regulatory compliance. Most business owners do not want to have to think about this stuff. I was running a an online marketing company recently. Um, had about 100, 120, 130 employees. And when it came down to keeping that company compliant with all of the various digital regulatory regimes around the world, we were spending six figures a year in engineering resources just to address that stuff. Um, Cybee gives you the ability to create one-click compliance reports for all of the major global regulatory frameworks, GDPR, DORA, HIPAA, SOC 2, you name it. For me, the challenge is figuring out, given we have these incredible technical capabilities within the Cybee platform, how can we translate those into the relatable problem and solution sets that are going to speak most to our small business audience? That's really the challenge. It's a communication challenge at this point more than a technology challenge.
Ethan, I could not agree more. And I think that was phenomenal advice that you gave everybody. So thank you so much for all of your time and insights today. To our listeners, your journey and Cybee's AI mission to safeguard through AI-powered security and seamless compliance is incredibly inspiring. So for those of you looking to move forward and take on more, I'd like you to go take a look at Ethan's work and explore their platform. You can do that by visiting Cybee.ai. And again, Ethan, thank you so much for getting up so early today to talk with me. And until next time, for everyone, stay secure, stay focused, and always stay curious. I hope you all have a great day. And until the next one, we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Darren. Pleasure to be with you.
The pleasure was all mine. Thank you, Ethan. Hey there, it's Darren from The Digital Shift. I wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the links in the description to learn even more information of everything we went over today. But if you enjoyed this podcast, then you are absolutely going to love this one. And if you're looking to look deeper into the technology that we go over in these videos, then go ahead and check out this one here. Regardless of which one you pick, you're going to walk away with something new. As always, I'll talk to you in the next one and keep being awesome.